Imagine this: you're a prophet of God, living a life of holiness and devotion, when suddenly, God gives you a shocking command: go, marry a prostitute. Yes, you heard that right. Why would God, the very definition of purity and righteousness, ask his prophet to do such a thing? Was this a test? A punishment? Or was there a deeper message hidden in this strange request? Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful love stories in the Bible, not just between a man and a woman, but between God and his people. Hosea was one of the minor prophets in the Bible, but don't let the term minor fool you. His message was anything but small. He lived during the 8th century BC, around the same time as the prophets Isaiah, Amos, and Micah. His ministry took place in the northern kingdom of Israel, a land that had turned its back on God, falling deep into idolatry, corruption, and immorality. The name Hosea means salvation, which is incredibly fitting because his life and message centered around God's saving love for his people, even when they were unfaithful. Who were Hosea's parents? The Bible does not explicitly mention Hosea's mother or give any details about his family background, but we do know that his father was Biri. In Hosea 1 verse 1, the prophet is introduced as the word of the Lord that came to Hosea son of Biri during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam son of Jehoash king of Israel. Hosea 1 verse 1, NIV. Although little is known about Biri, his name means my well or fountain, which could symbolize a source of wisdom or divine revelation. Some scholars believe he may have been a prophet himself, but the Bible does not provide further details. Hosea's calling: a man devoted to God. Hosea had a close relationship with God, and his prophetic calling was unique. Many prophets delivered their messages in words, but Hosea was called to deliver his message through his life. His personal pain, heartbreak, and obedience to God mirrored God's pain over Israel's unfaithfulness. At the time, Israel was spiritually and morally corrupt under the rule of King Jeroboam II, 793 to 753 BC. The nation was enjoying economic prosperity, but it came at a cost. They abandoned God, worshipped Baal, and engaged in injustice, violence, and unfaithfulness. God used Hosea to warn the people that their sins would lead to destruction unless they repented. But instead of just telling Israel how unfaithful they were, God made Hosea live it by commanding him to marry a promiscuous woman, Gomer. Gomer was the woman whom God commanded Hosea to marry, but little is directly known about her background before this event. The Bible introduces her in Hosea 1 verse 2, where God instructs Hosea to take a promiscuous woman, translated in some versions as a harlot or prostitute, as his wife. This alone suggests that Gomer was known for her immoral lifestyle, though it is unclear whether she was actively working as a prostitute or simply an unfaithful woman with a history of sexual sin. Her name, Gomer, in Hebrew means completion or finished. This could symbolize the completion of Israel's sinfulness, which had reached its peak, leading to their judgment. Some scholars believe that Gomer's name may have indicated her lowly status or even the shame associated with her lifestyle. Unlike other biblical women who have lineage and family background mentioned, Gomer's origins are completely unknown. The Bible gives no record of her parents, her tribe, or any family connections, which could suggest that she came from a dishonorable or insignificant background. Despite her reputation, God specifically chose her to be part of his divine message to Israel. This was not an accident. Her life and marriage were meant to be a mirror of Israel's unfaithfulness to God. She became the wife of Hosea, a prophet of God, which must have been a shocking and controversial union at the time. Hosea obeyed God's command and took Gomer as his wife. This must have been a shocking and difficult decision for a prophet of God. At that time, prophets were highly respected men who lived righteously and upheld God's laws. Marrying a woman with Gomer's background would have certainly brought shame, criticism, and ridicule from the community. However, Hosea's marriage was not just about him, it was meant to be a prophetic act, demonstrating God's relationship with Israel. After some time, Gomer conceived and gave birth to their first child, a son. God instructed Hosea to name him Jezreel, a name with deep significance. The name was a reference to the city of Jezreel, a place associated with bloodshed and judgment. Through this child's name, God was sending a message to Israel: the nation would soon face consequences for its unfaithfulness and disobedience. Despite this, Jezreel was a symbol of both judgment and hope, as God also promised that he would restore his people in time. Following Jezreel's birth, Gomer later conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. God told Hosea to name her Lo-ruhamah, which means no mercy or not loved. This was another prophetic sign, indicating that God's patience with Israel was reaching its limit. Their constant rebellion had distanced them from his mercy, and they would soon experience his judgment. However, even in this, God left room for hope, as he later declared that his mercy would eventually be restored. After Lo-ruhamah was weaned, Gomer bore a third child, another son. God commanded Hosea to name him Lo-ammi, meaning, not my people. This was a powerful statement about the broken relationship between God and Israel. The people had abandoned their covenant with him through idol worship and disobedience, and now God was declaring that they would no longer enjoy the privileges of being his chosen nation. However, even with this harsh declaration, God later promised that he would once again call them his people and restore their relationship with him. After Gomer had given birth to their 3 children, Jezreel, Lo-ruhamah, and Lo-ammi, her restlessness and struggles with faithfulness did not subside. The early years of their marriage must have been filled with moments of hope, but also tension, as Hosea's prophetic messages were closely tied to the names of their children. Each child served as a painful reminder of Israel's spiritual condition. Jezreel's name was a declaration of impending judgment, Lo-ruhamah signified the temporary withdrawal of God's mercy, and Lo-ammi was a direct message that Israel had broken its covenant with God. As time went on, Gomer became increasingly distant. Whether it was the pull of her past or the temptations of the world around her, she eventually left Hosea and her children. The Bible does not explicitly say when or how she left, but it is clear that she abandoned her family and returned to a life of promiscuity. This must have been an incredibly painful time for Hosea, a man who had obeyed God's command despite the shame and humiliation it brought him. He was now a single father, raising children whose very names carried messages of divine judgment, all while continuing his role as a prophet to an unrepentant nation. Hosea's pain reflected the pain of God himself. Just as Gomer abandoned her faithful husband, Israel had abandoned their faithful God. The people of Israel had turned to idols, particularly the worship of Baal, a Canaanite god associated with fertility and prosperity. They believed that their wealth and abundance came from Baal, rather than from the Lord. As a result, they engaged in corrupt practices, idolatry, and moral decay, completely disregarding God's commandments. Despite Gomer's betrayal, God commanded Hosea to seek her out and bring her back. This was a radical act of love, grace, and redemption. Hosea searched for his wife, eventually finding her in a degraded state. Some believe she may have fallen into slavery, as Hosea had to purchase her back for 15 shekels of silver and some barley, Hosea 3 verse 2. Whether she had been sold into slavery or had fallen into a desperate situation where she could no longer provide for herself, she had reached a place of utter hopelessness. Hosea redeemed her, not as a slave or a servant, but as his wife once more. He told her that she must remain with him and no longer live as she had before. This moment was a powerful foreshadowing of God's redemption. Just as Hosea paid the price to reclaim Gomer, God would one day pay the ultimate price for his people, through Jesus Christ. While Hosea's personal life was unfolding with heartbreak and redemption, his message to Israel continued. The nation was on the brink of disaster. The northern kingdom of Israel had become increasingly wicked under a series of corrupt kings who ignored God's warnings. They had made alliances with foreign nations, particularly Assyria, hoping that their political and military strength would protect them. However, these alliances only led to deeper spiritual corruption and eventual destruction. As Hosea prophesied, God's judgment finally came upon Israel. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire invaded the northern kingdom and completely destroyed it. The capital city, Samaria, was besieged and fell, and the people of Israel were taken into exile. Many were killed, others were scattered, and those who survived were forcibly relocated to different parts of the Assyrian Empire. This was the fulfillment of the prophecy given through the names of Hosea's children. Jezreel, the dynasty of Israel's kings, came to an end. The ruling house was wiped out, and the kingdom itself was defeated. Lo-ruhamah, God withdrew his mercy, and Israel faced destruction without divine intervention. Lo-ammi, the people of Israel were no longer recognized as God's chosen nation because of their unfaithfulness. After the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC, the Israelites were scattered throughout the Assyrian Empire. This exile was devastating, and for centuries, the northern tribes seemed to have disappeared from history. However, God's promise of redemption, spoken through Hosea and other prophets, remained in effect. Redemption for Israel came in multiple phases. The return of Judah, the southern kingdom. While the northern kingdom, Israel, was taken by Assyria, the southern kingdom, Judah, remained for over a century. However, due to their own sins, they too were eventually conquered by Babylon in 586 BC and taken into exile. Unlike Israel, Judah was later allowed to return. In 538 BC, under King Cyrus of Persia, the Jewish people were given the right to return to their land and rebuild Jerusalem and the Temple, Ezra 1 verses 1-4. This was a partial fulfillment of God's promise of restoration. However, the northern tribes did not return in large numbers. The coming of Jesus Christ. The ultimate redemption of Israel, as prophesied in Hosea 1 verses 10-11, was fulfilled through Jesus Christ. The prophecy that said, "In the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will be called children of the living God." Hosea 1 verse 10, NIV. Was later referenced by the Apostle Paul in Romans 9 verses 25-26, showing that this promise extended not only to Israel but also to Gentiles. Jesus came to reconcile all people to God, restoring the broken relationship between God and his people. Through faith in Christ, both Jews and non-Jews, Gentiles, were given the opportunity to become God's people once again. The Bible does not give details about how or when Hosea died. However, based on historical records, Hosea likely continued to prophesy until shortly before the fall of Israel in 722 BC. After that, there are no records of his later years. Since prophets were often persecuted, some believe Hosea may have been killed by the Israelites who rejected his message, similar to what happened to other prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. Others believe he lived in exile after Israel's fall. Regardless of how he died, Hosea's message of love, judgment, and redemption lived on. His words were preserved in the Bible, and his life story became one of the most powerful examples of God's unwavering love for his people. The Bible does not tell us what happened to Gomer after Hosea redeemed her. However, since Hosea brought her back and told her to remain faithful, it is possible that she repented and remained with Hosea. After being redeemed from a life of shame, she may have truly changed and lived the rest of her life in faithfulness. If this was the case, her story would serve as a powerful testimony of God's ability to transform even the most broken lives. She struggled but was still loved by Hosea. Another possibility is that she continued to struggle with her past, but Hosea remained patient with her, just as God does with his people. She disappeared from history. Some speculate that after being redeemed, she may have chosen a quiet life away from the public eye. Regardless of what happened, Gomer's life was meant to symbolize Israel's unfaithfulness and God's mercy. Whether she changed completely or continued to struggle, her redemption by Hosea was a reflection of God's grace, which is always available to those who turn back to him. The Bible does not provide specific details about what happened to Hosea and Gomer's children, Jezreel, Lo-Ruhamah, and Lo-Ammi, after their birth. However, their names carried powerful prophetic messages about the fate of Israel, and their lives were likely shaped by the unfolding events of Israel's downfall and eventual restoration. Jezreel. Jezreel was the firstborn son of Hosea and Gomer. His name was a prophecy of judgment upon Israel, referring to the historical bloodshed in the valley of Jezreel and the coming destruction of the northern kingdom. Since Jezreel's prophecy came true in 722 BC, when the Assyrian Empire invaded and destroyed Israel, it is likely that Jezreel lived to witness this event. He may have been among those who were either killed during the invasion, taken into exile by the Assyrians, or left behind in the ruins of the fallen kingdom. However, Hosea's prophecy about Jezreel also contained a promise of restoration. In Hosea 1 verse 11, God declared that one day, the people of Israel and Judah would be reunited and restored. This suggests that Jezreel's name, once associated with destruction, would one day be associated with hope and renewal. Lo-Ruhamah. Lo-Ruhamah, the second child and first daughter of Hosea and Gomer, was given a name that meant no mercy or not loved. This was a sign that God's patience with Israel was coming to an end, and judgment was imminent. Since she was likely a young girl during the fall of Israel in 722 BC, her fate is uncertain. In ancient times, during the destruction of a kingdom, women and children were often taken captive and forced into slavery by the conquering nation. Some were assimilated into the Assyrian Empire, while others may have perished during the invasion. However, God later reversed her prophecy. In Hosea 2 verse 23, God promised, I will show my love to the one I called not loved. This meant that Lo-Ruhamah's name, originally a sign of judgment, became a symbol of God's mercy being restored. While we do not know her personal fate, her name came to represent the promise that God's love for his people would never be permanently removed. Lo-Ami. Lo-Ami, the third child and second son, had the most tragic name of all, not my people. This name symbolized the broken relationship between God and Israel due to their unfaithfulness. By the time the Assyrians conquered Israel, Lo-Ami was likely still young. If he survived the invasion, he may have been taken into exile, along with many other Israelites, and forced to live in a foreign land. This would have fulfilled the meaning of his name, as the people of Israel were scattered and no longer identified as God's nation. However, like his siblings, Lo-Ami's name was also redeemed by God's promise. In Hosea 1 verse 10, God declared, "In the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will be called, 'children of the living God.'" This prophecy was later fulfilled in multiple ways. It pointed toward the eventual restoration of Israel and, more importantly, the coming of Jesus Christ, through whom both Jews and Gentiles could become God's people once again. The story of Hosea and Gomer is more than just an ancient account of a prophet and his unfaithful wife. It is a living parable of God's love, faithfulness, and redemption. The question that began this journey, why did God ask Hosea to marry a prostitute, now finds its full answer, because through Hosea's pain, heartbreak, and unwavering love, God wanted to show his people, then and now, just how deep and relentless his love truly is. At the time of Hosea, Israel had abandoned God, chasing after foreign gods, indulging in idolatry, and seeking security in political alliances instead of trusting in the Lord. Just as Gomer was unfaithful to Hosea, Israel was unfaithful to God. But despite their rebellion, God did not abandon them. He sent prophets like Hosea to warn them, to call them back, and to remind them that even in their worst moments, his love remained steadfast. But this is not just Israel's story, it is our story as well. The world today is not so different from ancient Israel. We, too, are surrounded by temptations, distractions, and countless things that pull us away from God. People turn to material wealth, fame, relationships, addictions, and worldly pleasures to fill the void that only God can satisfy. Just like Gomer, many chase after false loves, things that promise fulfillment but ultimately leave them broken, enslaved, and empty. Yet, the story of Hosea teaches us one powerful truth: God never stops pursuing us. No matter how far we run, he still calls us back. No matter how many mistakes we make, he is willing to redeem us. No matter how unworthy we feel, his love is not based on our performance, but on his character. Hosea's act of buying Gomer back, despite all she had done, is a foreshadowing of what Jesus Christ did for all of humanity. In the modern world, redemption is still available. Some may feel like they have gone too far, that they have made too many mistakes to return to God. But if Gomer's story tells us anything, it is that there is no such thing as being too far gone for God's grace. Just as Hosea paid a price to redeem Gomer, Jesus Christ paid the ultimate price for us on the cross. His sacrifice was the price of our forgiveness, restoration, and eternal life. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this story impacted you the most? Do you see God's love in a new way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more powerful Bible stories, teachings, and deep revelations, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Help us spread God's message by sharing this video with your friends and family. Let's keep learning, growing, and experiencing God's love together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless you.